Welcome back. So in this lesson, I'm just going to demonstrate how we actually start to create our folder structure for a SaaS platform as an MVP. So what we did was simply provided a prompt to Claude, and then based on our, of course, things that we want to create. So essentially, what happens first in the first step is we simply create our project structure, the architecture itself, right? So we provide the front end, the back end as to what we need, and then what Claude would do is, in addition to Copilot, of course, it would create or suggest the SaaS project structure with the front end separated, the back end, and then it will have a database and then Docker. Depends on, again, which structure you want to create. So it's always a good idea to create a modular structure with separated concerns and isolation. So for example, we do a front end, and then you do have a public folder, and then you have all the files, and then you have the assets separated with CSS and JS. And then similarly, backend, we have the controllers, services, and then Terraform, whatever it is that you want to use based on your architecture, the utilities, and then of course DB, and so on. So this is a good architecture, and the reason why is because when you start to code each one of these files or start to add, it will be easier for you to not only manage in the long run, but also debug. So you get a lot of errors, a lot of bugs, right? So it'll easy to identify which file has what error, and then you can of course build on that. And the third benefit is that it's modularized because you can add more services. So for example, if you need to add another Terraform module, it's just easy. Right now we have two stacks. We have the static site and we have the React app. If you want to add, let's say, Python or Django or Flask, you can simply add more modules to the existing Terraform tree. So that way it's easier. So once you actually finalize your architecture, we will let Claude know, and it's actually going to create, and it is creating all of these files for you. And that's really what the prompting and understanding how the efficient prompting works and what needs to be done. So it has to be thought through, not just give it a prompt, but actually design and plan your project first. So what's it doing is, in fact, all these phases that you're seeing is creating all these files. So it's creating the back end, it's actually creating the front end, assets, and then public, and so on. So as we speak, it's actually creating all these files. So software development has changed, and it has made our lives much, much easier. But nevertheless, of course, the complexity is still there. So with AI, human intervention is absolute necessary. You can't just rely on this, because in my experience, I've been working at this for quite some time. And what happens is, even though it creates all of this, it still leaves a lot of bugs and trails in the code. So every time you do something, it creates something, you need to make sure it creates correctly, and you have to go and check. So not so much of coding, perhaps, because it does code for you, but the monitoring has become more important. Well, before we used to actually code line by line, and it didn't make a difference because we know exactly what we're doing. But now it's a little bit more challenging, I'd say, because now you have to actually go and take a look at and see what exactly it's actually building. So in the main.tf file, what is this, right? So you have to be able to know exactly what it's provisioning, what kind of resources it's providing. For example, here in the main.tf or Terraform is doing S3 bucket React for app hosting. We're doing S3 bucket for versioning. So all these resources that it's actually going to spin when Terraform runs, it's actually creating the code. So the code is there. But to understand the code and make sure it works well, you need to still go back to the code and take a look at it, and just cannot blindly rely on all of this. Okay, so that's important. So go through, once it creates a project for you, make sure you go through each one of these. For example, it created the landing page, and then you can take a look at it. Another thing I want to mention here that I just ran through earlier is that use of these emojis. So if you're using hero icons, that's fine, but if you're using emojis, or for example like this rocket thingy, try not to use them in your code. So you can tell Claude or any AI tool that you're using not to use it, because you'll have these Unicode errors, right? So we typically use UTF, but then you have encoding errors later on. So it's better to not use those if possible. Okay. All right. So yeah, but this is what I wanted to share, is how the AI would actually set all this up for you, even write all the files for you, for example, whether it's services, modules, backend, front end. It will also spin up the server, Node.js, or whatever it is that you want to host on. It will do that. So it will do a lot of things for you. But to manage all of this and to come up with your own, product or project that's fully functional, you still have to go and edit. So notice even in the indexed file or the landing page, it doesn't really give you a lot of the, for example, if you want to do SEO, it doesn't give you all of those, right? So you need to go back and tell it. Well, that's fine, but still you need to understand the code. So the basics of Python or Java or whatever language you're using, it's still relevant and very, very important. And like I said, it's more monitoring and making sure your code flows well from one to the other. So I just wanted to give you that if you're into vibe coding or prompt engineering and creating your own SaaS product. So it's much, much easier that way. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Post in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.